Picture this. You're 10 years old. You just beat Crash Bandicoot 2. You're on a bit of a crash high. You're listening to the soundtrack, you're pretending to be Crash Bandicoot with your pals, you're making Crash levels on Little Big Planet, and you want more. You're going to Nova Scotia, and you bring your PSP. But just before, your dad puts Crash 3 on it, and you spend the whole trip playing it. And you love it. You love the graphics, the new characters, the soundtrack, and it quickly becomes your second favorite game next to Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time. But you can never seem to recapture the same magic on subsequent playthroughs. Now please, don't get me wrong, I love Crash 3, but over time I've noticed some cracks. Releasing just 1 year after Crash Bandicoot 2, Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped was better received and was one of the best-selling games on the PlayStation. But does Crash 3 deserve all the high praise? Well, let's start with the story. Taking place after the events of Crash 2, Cortex Vortex, try saying that 10 times fast, falls from space and crashes into a temple, releasing Aku Aku's evil twin, Uka Uka. It's then revealed that Uka Uka is the one who's been pulling the strings all along, and he's pissed at Cortex for failing to secure the power crystals in the second game, and the gems in the first game. And now that the power crystals and gems have disappeared from the present day, they have to use the new time twister created by Dr. Nefarious Tropy, no, not that Dr. Nefarious, to go back in time and get all the crystals back. So it's up to our two favorite furry marsupials to go back in time and collect the crystals and gems before Cortex, Uka Uka, and Nefarious do. Overall, pretty good setup until you remember there's crystals in the future levels, which, I guess they really didn't think that one through. So Warped isn't all that different from Crash 1 or 2 control-wise. However, you can now control Crash using the left analog stick no matter what version of the game you're playing. I forgot to mention this in my Crash 2 review, but on the PlayStation Network port of Crash 2, you couldn't use the left analog stick. I didn't mind too much, as with Crash Bandicoot's simple level structure, it's more or less built with the D-pad in mind. However, playing with the D-pad with hours on end really does a number on your thumb, so I'm glad this game allows you to play with the analog stick, no matter what version you're playing. Not only that, but with certain vehicles you can actually feel the controller rumble, which, I mean, isn't a big deal now, but in 1998 it was probably mind-blowing. Graphics are also amazing here, being better than the incredible-looking second game, even. Another huge improvement that 3 brings to the table is the total number of boxes being visible from the HUD. Fuck, I am stumbling over my words here. The total number of boxes being visible from the HUD, so you more or less know what to expect. Oh, another thing is vehicles. This game has a lot more than 1 or 2. In fact, maybe it has a little too many. Like, in the first warp room alone, we have 3 vehicle levels. 3! And a goddamn platformer! Totaling at a hefty 6 vehicles, we have the Submergible, Pura, this Jetmoto-style jet ski, a Harley, a dinosaur, and these 2 planes. The Submergible is something I've actually kind of grown to enjoy. It can feel a little awkward, but overall, not bad. While I vastly prefer Polar from the second game, Pura controls pretty decent too. He's probably my favorite quote-unquote vehicle in the game. The Jetmoto is a bit of a mixed bag. When it's a linear level, I enjoy using it because it reminds me of one of my favorite PS1 games, but in these open-world styled levels, yeah, this thing sucks. The motorcycle sucks, though I love the aesthetic of these levels, and I didn't mind playing through the first level with it. But once turning is introduced, yeah, dude, forget about it. The dinosaur is quite fun, but you only use them like twice in the game. And the planes are actually pretty okay, but I didn't want dogfights in my platformers. Speaking of platforming, the platforming levels in this game are as follows: Medieval times, Prehistoric jungle, Egyptian tombs, and the future. And that's only 5 types of platforming levels. That's a little low. I personally would have cut some of the vehicle levels in this game to make room for some more platforming levels. Maybe some levels set in ancient Greece, or perhaps a level or two set in Machu Picchu would have spiced things up just a little bit. Anyways, on to the level overviews. Our first level type is the medieval times, and I love these levels. They don't necessarily have the best platforming, but the music and spectacle is absolutely insane. These levels just have so much charm in them. From the frogs that turn you into princes when they kiss you, to those giant two-headed dudes that, when you get hit by them, you hit the TV screen. And then you have the castle that gets progressively bigger with each medieval level, and the medieval remix of the Warp Room theme is just grand. Next is the underwater levels, which aren't the best water levels in a platformer, but they're still solid enough. It's here where we find the aforementioned submarine, as well as these electric gates that gave me a lot of trouble as a kid for some reason. Next is the tiger levels. These levels are awesome. The music is great. You control Coco for the first time in the series. Again, I don't like these levels as much as the polar levels from Crash 2, as these levels can feel a little cluttered at times, but Pura's levels are still solid enough. Since I already talked about the Jet Moto levels, I'll move on to the Arabian levels. These levels have some of the most creative platforming in the game. I love the enemies, especially the swordsmen, and the aesthetic is absolutely fantastic. But these levels house one of my smaller problems with this game. And yes, it is a bit of a nitpick. So 3 out of the 5 color gems are found in these levels, and 2 out of those 3 are accessed via Death Route, and the blue gem is accessed via the very similarly themed tomb levels, and it's once again on a Death Route. The only colored gem that's not on a Death Route is the red gem. This is a bit of a problem, as there's not a lot of variety with the colored gems, unlike in Crash 2, where there's a lot of variety for going for the colored gems. Whether it be raking no boxes for the blue gem, using the secret entrance for the red gem, or going behind a fake wall for the green gem, it certainly felt more varied in 2. As stated beforehand, when you first do the motorbike levels, they aren't bad, but most of them are terrible, as you have to avoid cops and other racers. Like, bro, what is this, driver? Also, don't try and get the crystal and gem on your first run through. It's just not happening. Up next is the tomb levels, which are my favorite levels in the game. They have some of the most excellent platforming, the music is fantastic, the ice physics from 2 return, but it's not as annoying here, and there's a variant of these levels where you can't see Dick. We also have monkeys that throw poo at you. Nearly forgot to talk about these, but here are the swampy jungles. These levels are unique in the fact that they combine the chase levels from the previous games with the regular platforming stages. It's also here where we find Baby T the dinosaur. I also love the enemies here, more specifically these strange crash fish. Next is the future levels. These levels are great. The aesthetic is great, reminding me a lot of Ratchet and Clank. And it puts your platforming skills to the test. Honestly, some of my favorite levels in this game and in any platformer in general. Finally, we have the dogfighting levels set in World War I. And they're not terrible, but I could have done without them. At least you don't have to deal with waves and waves of enemies. Ratchet 2. Anyways, there's also a variant of these levels where you're racing other pilots, which is surprisingly fun. So that's the level themes, and aside from the vehicle bullcrap, they're pretty solid. But how do the bosses fare? Well, for the first time ever, I can say that they're pretty good. Not only do you actually get to interact with them via the Time Twister, but after their fights, you get a power-up Mega Man style, some of which, like the Death Tornado Spin, Double Jump, and Speed Shoes are actually quite useful, but then we have the Super Belly Flop and Bazooka, which are more or less useless. Tiny is a fantastic first boss. The fight itself is relatively easy, but the set piece is great. You're in a Coliseum in Rome with Dr. Cortex looking on, and every time you hit Tiny, you can hear boos from Cortex's minions. Next up is Dingodile, who you can cheese really easily, but Dingodile's personality more than makes up for it. Also, his theme is a bomb, so there's that too. Then we have Entropy, who tests your platforming skills, and he's another excellent boss. Jin is the only boss where you pilot a vehicle, and the only boss fought by Coco. He's got 2 phases and probably is the hardest boss in the game. The Cortex boss fight is the best boss in the game easily. Not only are you actually fighting Cortex instead of chasing him, Crash too, but Aku Aku and Uka Uka are fighting each other, which is just so epic. Now that we've got the main game out of the way, let's talk about the side content. Firstly, we have a demo for Spyro the Dragon, which is pretty dope and marks the start of the friendship between Naughty Dog and Insomniac Games. Secondly, we have secret levels, which are a bit of a mixed bag. Thirdly, we have the big new collectible in Crash 3, the Relics, which you can gain in time trials. I have very mixed feelings on the Relics. On platforming stages, they're a fun challenge, but in vehicle stages, they can go fuck themselves. You're awarded a Sapphire Relic, which is like the equivalent of a participation trophy if your time was good, the Gold Relics, which are required for 105%, and the Platinum Relics are only required if you're an insane masochist. These unlock the secret levels, which I preferred Crash 2's method of actually finding secret entrances for the secret levels, but that's just me. So that's Crash Bandicoot Warped. If there was more platforming and less shitty vehicles, this would be my favorite Crash game by far, but as it stands, Crash 2 is still my favorite Crash game. I give Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped an A-. Thank you so much for watching my video. Stay tuned next time when I review the 4th and final game made by Naughty Dog for the Crash Bandicoot series. And if you like my content, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and tap the bell to stay up to date. And yeah, I'll see you next time.